We're going to be talking about the Mitsubishi Eclipse, why it was the best four-cylinder turbo car of its time, and why it is now the laughingstock for all automotive manufacturers and enthusiasts of today. If you guys are interested in some DSM shirts, I also have these Ego Talon keychains. You can't find these anywhere else. And of course, can't forget about my Mitsubishi Eclipse, guys. So, link in bio. Mitsubishi Eclipse came into existence in the late 90s, 1989 to be exact, with the first generation DSM. What is a DSM? DSM is basically a baby between Mitsubishi and Chrysler that was made because Mitsubishi wasn't able to import a huge amount of vehicles into the US at the time, right? So they teamed up with Chrysler to make this new little company in the US of A, to where Mitsubishi can now build vehicles in the US and basically sell them to the domestic market here in the United States. And if you're not familiar with the DSM platform or joint venture between Chrysler and Mitsubishi, you might actually think that the Mitsubishi Eclipse is actually a Japanese or JDM car, right? So it's often confused. It does have a very JDM style or look to it, considering the fact that it's a Mitsubishi. And that's how the first generation Eclipse, Ego Talon, and Plymouth Laser came to be. So these cars pretty much existed from 1989 to 1994. And within the first generation DSM, we had two separate categories. We had the 1GA and the 1GB DSM, the non-turbo 4G63, the GS Turbo, which came with the turbocharged 4G63 engine, which also came out in the Mitsubishi Evo 3. And then we had the best one you could possibly get, which was the Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX, which was the turbocharged 4G63 with the all-wheel drive system, which basically made him a two-door Evo, which is pretty cool considering the fact that we didn't get the Evo until 2003 in the United States. So it was a great and cheaper alternative for us here Americans to have access to a very powerful power plant and a nice all-wheel drive system to take us down the drag strips. And people started to see the potential as far as modability and power output that these cars could put down, right? So the DSM has always been known to be a very fast vehicle with a boost controller in tune. These cars started gaining a lot of traction at the drag strips. They were beating cars with twice the engine size, you know, with no issues, and it was just a really cheap car that you can modify. So after the first generation is when things started to get tricky for the DSM joint venture. Mitsubishi and Chrysler actually parted ways in 95, and that's technically when DSM died. So a lot of people, or a lot of purists per se, are going to say that anything past 95 is not considered a DSM, but essentially most people will umbrella the second generation Eclipses and Ego Talons as a DSM just because it's the same chassis, same power plant, everything. There's also guys that are going to say that a non-turbo Eclipse or Ego Talon with the 420A is also not considered a DSM, but no, it's still a DSM. It's still a Chrysler engine, Mitsubishi chassis, whatever. It's still the same thing. So yeah, hopefully you don't have that mindset. If you have a turbo GST or GSX, guys, you should embrace the non-turbo guys as well. I don't see why you should exclude them. The second generation Eclipse came from 1995 to 1999, and of course we had the 2GA from 1995 to 1996, and then we had the 2GB from 1997 to 1999, with the 2GA being less aggressive, having the smiley front bumper, different rear bumper, different headlights, and the 2GB being more aggressive, came with a high-rise wing, bigger side skirts, bigger rear bumper, more bubbly, just better lines overall, and in my opinion the most aesthetic years. The Mitsubishi Eclipse came out in 4 different trim levels, including the RS being the base model with manual doors, manual windows, rear drums, no rear sway bar, black door handles, and of course the non-turbo 140 horsepower 428 engine. Right after that we had the Eclipse GS, which came with rear brakes, rear sway bar, side skirts, painted door handles, painted side mirrors. Right above that we had the Eclipse GST, which was the front wheel drive turbocharged 4G63 Eclipse, very popular. Of course, came with all the options as well. And then we finally had the Eclipse GSX, the most sought after trim. This is the all-wheel drive turbocharged 4-cylinder 4G63 with all the options included. As far as the Ego Talon, we had the ESI being the non-turbo 420A. We had the TSI being the front wheel drive turbo one, and then we had the TSI all-wheel drive being just like the Eclipse GSX with the all-wheel drive system and 4G63. The only difference between both the Evo Talon and Eclipse was the bumpers, the wheels, the headlights, the tail lights. It was a completely different car, and I feel like the Evo Talon is a rarer car to see nowadays, especially the 2GB. Fortunately, the Evo Talon didn't make it to 1999, so the Evo Talon only existed from, as far as the second generation goes, from 1995 to 1998. So the 97 to 98 Evo Talon, in my opinion, is the most aesthetic. It has door slashes on the doors, which is pretty crazy. I haven't really seen that in any other car. It's very aggressive, it looks very much like an Eagle, and I actually believe they're a little bit rarer to see over the Mitsubishi Eclipse, right? And if I was to build a DSM again, I think it would be an all-wheel drive TSI Evo Talon with the door slashes on the side. I used to have a black one, it was non-turbo. But to me, it was very aggressive. I think it's a little more aggressive over the Eclipse. By the time the second generation Eclipse was out, the popularity for this absolutely skyrocketed, especially with the games like Need for Speed Underground, and of course the very famous movie The Fast and the Furious, with the Eclipse being the hero car for Brian O'Connor. So this absolutely cultivated the tuning scene for us today. I believe so. I believe Fast and the Furious had a big influence. It's just crazy to see how the DSM had a huge role, not just in the movie, but in the tuning scene. I believe it paved the way for a lot of kids and a lot of people today, right? So part of me, I'm gonna be honest, yeah, the Fast and the Furious definitely influenced me as far as why I like cars today alongside Need for Speed Underground. The Eclipse was always my favorite car to have, and I've always told myself that I was gonna own one as soon as I was able to, right? So that's how I ended up with mine. DSMs are popular, but of course the DSM joint venture is now dead, and it's basically just Mitsubishi on their own. And for some reason, they came out with the third generation Eclipse. So no hate towards my 3G guys. I still love you guys. You guys are still part of the Mitsubishi family, but you guys got the short end of the stick. They didn't get all-wheel drive. The styling was completely different. I believe that the people that designed it and engineered it were basically trying to push it towards a more general public or more general audience, to where the DSM was more of a motorsport division designed for the car enthusiasts that wanted to go fast. Would I modify a 3G? Honestly, no. I'll be honest with you guys. I've never liked them. I remember seeing the first one come out. It was like a silver 3G Eclipse that was just driving by, and me and my dad saw it and we're like, is that the Eclipse? And we're like, no, like what do they do? First of all, they don't have much aftermarket support. I'm aware that people do the Evo head conversion, right? Basically Evo swap them. And I know you could also all-wheel drive swap them as well, but if it just didn't come with all-wheel drive or turbos from the factory, which made the platform very hard for the average person to get into, right? So someone could just go into the dealer, pick up a GSX, have a turbo and all-wheel drive system already, and then go from there, to where if you were to get a 3G Eclipse, you would kind of have to go above and beyond to swap it, you know, put a turbocharger, make sure the internals are good, make sure everything's properly set up to where the car can handle it, right? And not only that, you were also limited to a front-wheel drive drivetrain only. There was no all-wheel drive versions, and you know, I believe the popularity after that just kind of went downwards. So the third generation Eclipse was from 2001 to 2005, if I recall. So unfortunately, yeah, it didn't have a lot of popularity. It did come out in Too Fast, Too Furious, but even then, like, and I believe Mitsubishi did that because they decided to bring out the Mitsubishi Evo in 2003. So we had the Evo 8, Evo 9 from 03 to 06, and I kind of think that Mitsubishi wanted to downplay the Eclipse from being its hero 4-cylinder turbo car to the Evo, because there'd be no point if they had a turbocharged all-wheel drive car competing against another turbocharged all-wheel drive car, right? So they had to downplay one. The Evo has already had its history since the Evo 1 and the Galant VR4, so I think Mitsubishi just kind of, you know, stuck alongside the Evo on that one. And it gets worse, just wait. So right after that, we have the fourth generation Eclipse in the 2006 to 2015 years. I think they tried to redesign a little bit closer to the 2G Eclipse with the curvier body lines. And although it did have some popularity amongst the tuning scene, and it had a decently powered V6 engine making like 260 horsepower, it was still front wheel drive. Of course, aftermarket support wasn't really there like the DSM still have today. I still believe that the DSM community is alive and well, and I believe the aftermarket support is always going to be there for those cars, to where the 4G Eclipse, I believe you're going to end up having a lot more trouble finding aftermarket parts or performance parts to make these cars fast, right? So I know people also do the conversions, all-wheel drive conversions, turbocharge them, and they make them very fast, but again, it's not out the box. It's something that you have to modify extensively and have some sort of mechanical knowledge to be able to do, right? But then we started seeing renders and news starting to come out about Mitsubishi deciding to bring back the Mitsubishi Eclipse, and as many of us Mitsubishi enthusiasts started to get, you know, hyped up around it, once we found out that Mitsubishi decided to bring out the Mitsubishi Eclipse SUV crossover, we kind of just second guessed our reality, and we're just thinking about what Mitsubishi was thinking about, right? Because they already had the Mitsubishi Outlander out, which was basically the same thing. We just don't understand how or why they wanted to keep that name alive, right? If anything, it just made the enthusiast community, especially the Mitsubishi Eclipse community, just sad, man. Like, we were the laughing stock for everyone. Now, if I recall correctly, I think the Mitsubishi Eclipse name actually came from a racehorse that won, I think, 20 races. I have to look it up, but that's kind of where the Eclipse name comes from. It was off a racehorse. But how do you go from a all-wheel drive turbocharged 4-cylinder monster to a family-friendly SUV that gets you what, like 30 mpgs? I don't know. It was a very stupid decision for Mitsubishi, and I believe it's a good example for other automotive manufacturers as far as what not to do with a lot of their legend cars. But of course, there's always that hope inside of me that believes that Mitsubishi might change in the future and will someday bring back a little turbocharged 4-cylinder all-wheel drive coupe that could compete with the modern day sports cars. And if they do, you can take my money, because I absolutely love the Mitsubishi Eclipse. I believe that it has a lot of potential to be able to be brought back, right? I believe the 2G Eclipse has timeless body lines till this day. Every time I take out my Mitsubishi Eclipse, it's one of the cars that just stands out. It's one of the cars that hasn't aged. If anything, it's aged like fine wine. I think it's a car that's going to be beautiful no matter the time frame, no matter the year. And if you own one, please take care of it, because I'm starting to see them turn a little bit more scarce. I'm starting to see them kind of disappear, and I'm starting to see a lot of people I see a lot of people looking for them, and people aren't willing to sell them unless you're willing to pay a hefty price. And although they were once that car that could basically beat anything in the streets, I definitely don't see it competing with modern day sports cars anymore. So although they could still beat a lot of modern day cars, which is quite impressive for a car from the 90s, you just have all these new cars like the Supras running 9s with like a downpipe and tune, which is ridiculous, right? So it takes a lot more out of a DSM to run those numbers, but it's very, very possible. And if I'm not mistaken, the fastest 4-cylinder turbo car in the world is actually a Mitsubishi Eclipse with the Red Demon. So that's pretty cool to hold the record, right? Anyways, before I close out the video, if you guys are interested in some DSM shirts, I also have these Ego Talon keychains. You can't find these anywhere else. And of course, can't forget about my Mitsubishi Eclipse, guys. So link in bio. If you guys have anything else to add or any questions, write them down in the comments section below. Besides that, I'll let you guys go here. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on next week's video.